Okay, guys, here we go. I think it's that magic time. Welcome to this week's happy hour. Again, for those of you who haven't been on in weeks past, this is kind of a salute to what we normally get to enjoy is seeing everybody in the meet and greet at our ISFSI social every year. And so it's a great way of networking, and it's really kind of snowballed into helping the membership out and getting people in contact with each other and other members that might not be on the call, and really paying it forward to all the other instructors within ISFSI organization. And to be honest, this is exactly why I joined ISFSI many years ago, was to be in the same room with all of you guys and be able to share interests and be, to quote Brad French, around like-minded individuals, and again, to try to pay it forward. So this week we are talking about officer development and what we can do. And this is something very near and dear to my heart, because this is something that I think every organization struggles with. I think they all think they are doing maybe somewhat of a good job or maybe not so good of a job, but I think we can all agree that we can all do it a lot better. And it's tough when you're kind of in an inbred organization where you just kind of foster everybody from within, and you think you're doing the right thing, but maybe you need to be on the periphery and talking to your colleagues out there and making sure, or seeing what everybody else is doing. You know, I've been back and forth with Mark here last week, and we've been sharing or he's been sharing some ideas with me, and we're really, in my organization, really trying to make this the forefront, because we have a major upward movement in my organization as far as membership, or our members getting ready to promote, and a lot of the people that have been around leaving. So we want to try to make sure that we're doing the right thing. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark and Mike to kind of get the conversation started. And just a couple rules of engagement here. Remember, for those of you either who have or have not been on, that if you have everybody mute their mics, and if you have a question, you can either just kind of raise your hand and I'll call on you, or open up that chat box and fire away in the chat box, and I'll try to make sure I call on you so we can give you guys ample time. But it's more about the conversation than it really is about, you know, one or two people steering the entire conversation. So please chime in, let us know what you're doing. I think this will be a real great conversation today. Pete or Jason, you guys have anything to add before we get rolling here? Hey, Jason, no. Pete, no. Okay, Mark and Mike, take it away, buddy. Mark, we'll start with you.
Oh, and I'll defer to Chief Richardson. Any opening comments? Chief's the online committee chair, and any opening comments there, sir?
Start off by saying thanks to everybody for taking the time out to stop in. We greatly appreciate it. We'd obviously like to see the numbers continue to grow and get bigger. And as everybody said, this is a great opportunity for everybody to share and learn from each other. You'll hear it from me all the time. In my opinion, R&D should stand for rip off and duplicate when possible. So rather than you reinventing the wheel, if there's somebody out there that can help you, that's what we're here for. So take it away, Mark.
Very good, sir. Thank you. And then more than anything else, I look at this kind of like a bobsled. I'm gonna push real hard for a couple minutes, and then hopefully just toss it out there and start sharing those ideas and hearing from you all and everybody and their experiences and best practices, fails. I got plenty of those, so we can go on for hours with that. But to me, the conversation starts with what is the issue. We have to identify current state to then get to future state. So the current situation, I'll open up with a question and just kind of look for nods from the crowd, or if they want to type something in chat, so we're not, you know, with this many people talking over each other. But I would ask a yes or no question. Can you think of a crucible moment when you were training as a new firefighter? You're at your training division, your probate process, whatever onboarding process they had for you as a new firefighter in your organization. Can you think of a crucible moment that you would have experienced where you felt like you were challenged and you rose to the occasion? So for me, I remember climbing a 135-foot aerial, and not that I was necessarily scared of normal heights, roofs and things like that, but I'd never climbed a 135-foot aerial. So I remember being significantly concerned as this thing is kind of drifting around in the wind up there, but feeling afterwards like I had done something. And so just by a yes or no, can you think of something, some challenge you experienced, the first line you advanced into a fire, training fire, in your training, something that was a defining moment? And I see nods, I see nods, I see yes, yes. And generally speaking, when we look at that new firefighter training, we look to create those challenges. We're all in that training business. And we know that what makes a firefighter better is taking somebody from a point of limited knowledge to some knowledge. And in that process, particularly in our industry, that means some physical challenges, some mental challenges, some that first time they get real heat in a can, whatever it is. So we know that exists. We know we push for that model. So the follow-up question to that is, can you think of your training as a new fire officer, some equivalent, some moment where in your training, not once you got on the line, there are plenty of challenges, but in the preparation, in the pipeline that you were in, can you think of a moment like that where just defined you in your Officer 1 class, your whatever else you took? And just give me a shake or a yes or no. I see a couple yeses, and I'm also seeing a couple no's. And I would submit that generally speaking, when we look at the fire service in general and training a new fire officer compared to training a new firefighter, they're completely different. We look for those challenges that we want to push on a new firefighter to prepare them for what comes next. New fire officer, some organizations don't even have a training process to be a new fire officer. If the officer's off, you just ride up. You don't have to have Fire Officer 1. You don't have to have any other certification. I would argue that there are very few places where Fire Officer 1 as a certification really means much. I know the Fire Officer 1 class that I took from the Commonwealth of Virginia involved writing something like 15 memos, was kind of the highlight of the entire course. And over the next 10, 11 years as a lieutenant on the line, I wrote 1 memo, and that included some time in basic training where I was charged with terminating recruits. And even then, not that many. And so the point to that whole discussion, to open up this idea for us to look at, is that there is a problem, a significant problem in the fire service with how it trains and prepares its officers to do their jobs. And the final point I'll make is everything that I think you may have been thinking about, and I could be wrong, tell me if I'm wrong, was with respect to that first promotion to lieutenant, because everybody's like new firefighter, new fire officer, lieutenant. Well, what training did you receive to be a captain? What training did you receive to be a chief officer? And I'm not saying that you went to NFA, and I'm not saying that you did a white paper, and I'm not saying, what did your organization train you to do? And did they put as much depth and effort and resource into training you as a fire officer as they did as a new firefighter? Because what we can speak to really clearly is that leadership changes at every level. The leadership and how you apply it as a lieutenant is vastly different than how you apply it as a chief officer. The fact that the organizations that we generally serve for don't have that robust systems-based approach to training is the central issue. And they view it as different from the firefighters. Seth, sir.
Yeah, there's a couple callers that are on the call that need to mute their mics. If you're not on through your computer, if you could just mute your phone. There's a little bit of background noise. Sorry about that, Mike.
No, you're good. So with that, I suggest that's the scope of the problem, and it's fire service writ large. It's not just, some individual organizations are doing this, some are doing that, but looking for those places where they train before you become a lieutenant, before you become a captain, before you become a chief officer, after you become a lieutenant, after you become a captain, at every level consistently, it's very rare. And while there's the FSI model and take college classes, and again, that's not training, that's education. I'm not devaluing education, but from a training perspective, to train that officer to how to react on a live incident scene, to train that officer how they deal with conflict in a firehouse, it's just not there. And so my hope for the discussion today is that we can look at that problem and exchange ideas on what makes it better. The last thing before I finish pushing the bobsled is just a couple thoughts, a couple acronyms. I'm an acronym person. The first one is that whatever solution we apply as organizations to training our officers, it has to be 2 C's and 2 S's, CCSS, comprehensive, cohesive, systematic, and sustainable. And if there's one thing the fire service, and I say this broadly, I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, but if there's one thing the fire service is really not good at, it's sustainability. We'll start a program all day long. We'll come up with a gee whiz idea. We'll buy the new widget. But what happens the following year, 3, 5, 10 years later, when somebody looks back and goes, oh yeah, what did we do with that? We're gutting a driver simulator that we spent $200,000 for, that after a couple years sat collecting dust because the software upgrades within our purview at the time to get. And so those elements are critical. And the other one is 3 R's, robust, realistic, and relevant. Robust, realistic, and relevant. And I would submit, again, there's very few certification classes, Officer 1, Officer 2, Officer 3, which are supposed to be, ostensibly, they are the preparatory certifications to be officers in the fire service. There's very, very few of them that answer those 3 R's. The relevancy part, when you're in a regional or a statewide class and they're talking about policy and procedure for the quote unquote any town fire department, that's not relevant. Why are we not talking about my department's SOPs, policies, and procedures? Why are we not talking about my tactics and how we employ them where I'm at? And if you're sterilizing the content in that course, then what's the true learning that's coming out? You're effectively saying, hey, take this class, get a piece of paper, and then when you come back, we'll teach you what you need to do. Whose time did we just waste? So with that said, I'll just throw it out there for some folks to either ask questions or offer solutions for things that you're doing where you see that we're pushing the ball forward on how we train officers, with the hope being that we can share that experience and incorporate it into what we're doing now. And if not, trust me, I could talk for about 8 hours on this and make your ears bleed, because this has been everything I've been dealing with for going on 4 years now. I eat, live, and breathe this stuff. So
I'll jump on, and then I'm gonna kick it to Jack. And when Jack's done, he's gonna look at somebody and he's gonna kick it to somebody. We're not gonna let anybody sit back on this one. So once you're done, you decide who you're gonna kick it to. So everybody better get prepared to have something to say. 2 things that really struck a chord with me that Mark talked about, probably because they're one of the few things that I can say, yeah, we made some progress there. And by we, I mean the state of Illinois. I want to speak to things we're doing because that's where I'm still active. And you're spot on, Mark, right? It's a nationwide problem. We certify our people, but we don't train them. We don't really teach them how to execute the job, and it shows. It really does show. So a couple of things that we're doing in the state of Illinois. One is, I'll speak to Chicago Fire Department as well. But anyway, the state of Illinois is that we've begun leadership development and decision-making training for firefighters. So part of the solving the problem for us is that you have to teach this from day one. You have to make leadership, and not just an hour somewhere in the curriculum. You have to make it part of their fundamental training that you have to learn. We teach leadership and followership, and we teach it with the accompanying officers and the chief officers present during the course of the training. So each level gets separate training, and each level trains together during the course of the week. And we find that extremely valuable. The feedback's been extraordinarily good, and we're trying to find ways to inculcate this in other people's curriculum. So I think that's one of the critical things is you got to start early. If you start teaching leadership principles when the guy gets his first bugle, you wasted 10 years or whatever it took for him to get it. And as an organization, you're devaluing the leadership. So I think that's one key thing. And then another thing you talked about relevancy, and I thought that was spot on. And one of the things we were able to do in Chicago right before I left, with the assistance again of the state training guys, is we were able to bring our officers down for 5 weeks to make sure they got their FO1. We were able to bring captains down for 2 weeks and chiefs down for 4 weeks. And part of what we did there is we grabbed our SOPs and our SOGs and we gave them to the state training cadre and said, what here is relevant to your curriculum? What can you use, what can you plug into your curriculum to meet the FO1 classes or FO2 or whatever it is we were teaching? And they did an extraordinary amount of work grabbing Chicago's SOGs and saying, okay, we can use this here, we can use that there. So as often as possible during the course of the training, we were speaking directly to Chicago policy and procedures, which made it much more relevant for the students and made them feel like the class had some meaning to them. So you get a little bit more buy-in that way. But I'll tell you, if you haven't done it, it takes an extraordinary amount of effort. And I was really lucky that I had the guys from the state working with us that are willing to put in the effort, because they really did a good job. Because both sides of the equation, the state wanted to make sure we really were meeting the core curriculum, and the city wanted to make sure, because we got all kinds of people, human resources, all these other people that want their 2 hours with the new lieutenants, and we had to be able to convince them that we were covering that material and we didn't need to necessarily sit through your bullshit. We're going to give them our version of the bullshit. So those two things are my contribution. And Jack, what do you got to add?
I think one of the things Mark touched on is sustainability. And I think one of the things I've noticed in my fire department in Central Virginia is we're end result. And a lot of the people that enter into programs are end result oriented. They want to know where the finish line is. Here's where it's at. And while that's important, we have to come up with a way to start a program. Standards driven, whether it's NFPA, whatever you go by, you have to subscribe to something. But it's also okay to say, there is not a program like this anywhere. We are starting this, and we're going to set our own objectives. I was very fortunate to have come up in a frontline organization, or an organization that provided company officer training that was not administratively focused. And you had certain objectives, certain benchmarks, certain things that you had to meet that included having a fire officer ride behind you while you rode in the front seat. So if things started to go bad, you had somebody that could turn around and, you could say, hey, I'm not ready for this yet. So, and I'm very fortunate to have been part of that. And it made me a better company officer. It set me up for success. At the same time, people that are goal driven, and a lot of the things that I've seen in my organization personally is they're very paper driven. They want that fire officer 1, fire officer 2. We don't want to provide that frontline company officer deal where, there's a difference between an engine company officer and a truck company officer. And we say yes too often. Just because you're a good firefighter doesn't mean you're going to be a good company officer. There are certain things that come along with that at the operational and administrative level. You kind of have to give them that taste, and you just can't make it a piece of an evaluation. You can't say career development, you need to do this to get a better evaluation next time. If people don't want to be a company officer, don't force them. That's fine, but they've got to find something else to do, whether it's driver, operator, or being that good firefighter in the back. But I've seen us pushing, mediocre firefighters to that company officer rank, and we expect them to be better. Mediocre firefighter is going to breed a mediocre officer, and I've seen that trickle down effect where now that mediocre officer is just lackluster and not providing good leadership as an example for their personnel, and it's a snowball effect that's hard to stop. So I think if anybody's looking for these kind of situations, we need to start somewhere. Don't look for the end result. Don't look for that finish line. You can throw so many cliches and analogies out there, but just start somewhere and start with the fundamentals of a truck company officer, the fundamentals of an engine company officer, the fundamentals of a rescue and engine and truck company officer. But so you got to start somewhere, and just be willing to start, take that risk, and then allow the program to grow and develop from there, and solicit feedback from the people going through the programs. So I'll kick it over to somebody I don't know. How do you say the last name? Is it Etchison, Caleb Etchison?
Yeah, well, you nailed the last name right. And I apologize if I have to cut out early. I've got some recruits that should be meeting me up here for this maze here in just a minute. So I I don't really have a whole lot to offer. I'm more of a listener than an offer, but what I would really like to say, or what I would like to see with our program at my department, is to have part of the senior officers sort of task book for their 1, 2, and 3 year is to train somebody below them at their job. So it kind of helps them to hit up those the JPRs and the stuff that we need for recertification, helps them to relearn some of that stuff that they've already learned, but it's also, it challenges them to teach somebody else. So that's something that I'm really hoping to implement, but you know, as soon as I finish teaching these recruits how to get through this maze, I can get working on it. And I'll kick it over to Chief Coy.
Well, thanks, neighbor. Thanks, Caleb, and we're glad you're here regardless if you have to leave. So, you know, I think the one stance that we forget about is we do focus on that entry-level portion of the officer program, which is Officer 1, Officer 2, Officer 3. But then what about the continuing professional development for officers that are already in place? What are you doing to continue, whether it's leadership, whether it's HR, whether it's motivation, whether it's company officer training? How are you developing and continuing to grow those officers once they make rank? And one of the things that we're doing, again, we're a small little combination department, but we're doing a monthly 1 hour feature topic for our officers, and it's professional development. We have experts from around the country. Some of you have even done those classes for us where we feature them for 1 hour on a topic. So it could be buddy to boss. How do you break the buddy to boss relationship that you might struggle with as a new company officer? So we're taking it larger than just the Officer 1 or Officer 2 curriculum and focusing on key issues every month with professional development for those folks. And like I said, we're doing it for 45 minutes to an hour. Right now we're doing it electronically, which is really cool because we get to feature presenters from around the country that can engage and interact with our officers and give them a different perspective than they see locally here. So I would challenge us all to look at how do we continue to grow our officers and not just wash our hands of it once they make rank. And from that, Vince, what do we do up north?
We sort of redeveloped our officer program a couple of years ago. We are trying to certify the officers now, so that we do follow the ISFSI manual in the chapters, but that is all done online and home study stuff. We've broken out 5 modules like leadership, communication, and stuff like that they do online, and then we do a 2-day workshop that really reinforces, and we do, you know, case studies and situational practice to apply the stuff they've learned online. And then afterwards they do the JPRs to do their certification. So they hand in their homework for officer stuff. So it's, you know, been 1.5 years or so since we started that. It was well received, and they really liked nobody likes doing the online stuff, but they liked applying it once we got to the classroom, and we've sort of gone in that direction. Sort of what Peter said earlier about, we started with our recruits with a lesson on leadership and communication, and now we're looking to sort of build that and grow that so when they first come in to be an officer or right to be an officer, that's not the first time we're talking about leadership or, you know, coaching. Coaching is the biggest thing that we've been working on for our chief officers, is how to coach. So it's not standard up here in Canada, but that's where we've been going in Halifax. And I'll toss it over to Mark Davidson, who's sitting beside me on the computer screen.
Oh, heck, I've already run my lips way too much. Let me kick it over to, oh, Chris. Chris is raising his hand. Chris, you're up.
So I'll speak shortly on the Fire Officer 1 and 2 dilemma. I had the unfortunate pleasure of being on the redevelopment curriculum group when the latest NFPA standard came out. And that was one of the biggest complaints that we had from across the Commonwealth was the memo-driven course. So you know, we worked with you know, both ISFSI and JBL. We settled on JBL because of the Navigate platform to give folks some time on the computer because a lot of people we're still lacking in those kind of skills. But we gave everyone the flexibility to use the curriculum, but also to take the time ahead of class to figure out where you're teaching this thing and get involved with them and put their locality specific stuff into it so that it would be relevant. Unfortunately, that relies on good instructors taking the time and the desire and the effort to get out there and do that. And we always have some that are and some that aren't. Some that just show up and teach the canned program and make their $24 an hour state wage, and others that spend countless hours ahead of time to make even a 3-hour one-night class extremely relevant for the students that are in the class. And it does get tough sometimes when you have like a regional event and you're trying to cater to 5 or 6 different departments, but that's when the networking can come into play. That's when really good discussions come into play. And a good instructor can guide that, still kind of meet the intent of the curriculum and let the students kind of drive the class and really get something out of it, versus just, hitting through 60 or 70 PowerPoint slides. As you know, because you've been down there, we've started a smaller version of your Officer Development Academy, and we start at the Master Tech level and go up through Captain. There are plans to make one for the battalion and deputy chief level that hasn't gotten there yet. And it's like anything else in the fire service. This year, everyone's hot and heavy on the admin topics. Next year, everyone's hot and heavy that we need to do more fireground stuff. We're still killing people on the fireground, but we're still killing careers in the firehouse. So finding that balance between the two. We spend 5 to 10% of our time doing emergency response, and the other 90 to 95 in the firehouse, managing all the other fires that will instantaneously kill our careers if we don't manage them correctly. Finding that balance to where people will begrudgingly learn something from the admin side because they know there's a little bit of tactical driven fire side in the next chapter is tough. And one of the things that we stressed when we rolled out the new courses was get folks that are from your area that want to come out and talk about this stuff. Yes, HR folks might not be the right folks, but if you have the right one, they're invaluable. Local high school or college teachers that really know English and not fire department English, that want to come out and teach that, they are invaluable. Tap into your resources and don't do all the work yourself. Do the whole R&D from Chief Richardson, and then you have to have the balance of interior or inside folks teaching, but also outside folks. Bringing in outside folks can give people a different perspective, but if that's all you have, then you kind of lose the relevancy if they don't take the time to understand what's going on in your locality. But they might have something extremely important to talk about that would really benefit. So finding that balance between the inside folks and the outside folks is also, a tough one for some folks because, they can just sit back and watch somebody else do it versus having to develop everything themselves.
Great stuff, Chris. I think what you hit it right on the head as far as finding that balance between outside and inside folks, because, I don't need, Brad or Tony coming to my organization and talking about tactics because we don't live those two guys' worlds. We're not a city department. So maybe that's the balance of, doing strategies and tactics inside for officer development and then having more of an admin feel on the outside. Making sure everybody, I just want to remind everybody to check the chat room there, and there's a lot of good stuff going back and forth as far as links go and information there. So make sure you guys have that window open. I'm really a big fan of the third-party testing, and I'm not saying that the third-party testing determines that you're going to be an officer in your organization, but it applies that validity to your organization. We have a extraordinarily difficult requirement to be an officer in our organization, and you have to go through this series of steps that you have to take these outside courses, and then we concentrate on the inside as far as doing blue card simulations and understanding SOGs and SOPs, but we really rely heavily, and I'll just give you one example, on the CPSE fire officer designation. And I feel like that's a really good tool to kind of capture what a fire officer's coursework should look like outside of your organization. And it also forces, if you're staying true to that, it also forces you to keep that officer development going to recertify every 5 years. I just got recertified for my FO and my CTO, and it's no joke. And you can only count the last 5 years of coursework, and it really takes a tremendous amount of work to keep those 2 designations up and running. So check that out. I'm a big fan of it. We went from this paper task book, if you will, that we kind of incorporated Loveland Sims, Des Plaines, Monterey, the list goes on and on. We kind of took like 7 different organizations, and all of us training officers got together and kind of made one acting captain task book. And it was really heavy on the actual raw skills, so many incidents, scene size up, so many meds, so many MCIs, blah, blah, blah. But really it didn't capture the actual coursework behind it that you want to find through other organizations. So we ended up putting that online and through Target Solutions so everybody can kind of chip away at it. But I'll leave you guys with this, is that it's got to be sustainable, right? So the big thing in our organization is it wasn't a transparent process before I started tackling this. It was kind of the good old boys club of like, oh, we like you the best and the guys like you the best, so you're going to get the jobs and if you take all the coursework. Well, you can take all the right coursework, but you still got to be a good officer, right? And you still got to be a good leader. So it's got to be transparent. It's got to be sustainable. So we make sure that all the coursework that we require from our company officers is offered every 3 years. And if it's not offered every 3 years, somebody gets a pass on that coursework. So it's got to be available and attainable by them. I'm going to kick this over now to Brad French, my great friend.
Hey, buddy. So I actually ended up calling in on my phone and my audio was messed up, so it probably looks like I'm still muted on there. But anyways, so a lot of great stuff, and I'm kind of always good for just a spattering of random, totally disjointed, disconnected thoughts on stuff, and so that's what I'm going to do just based on what I've been jotting down here, having the opportunity to listen to everybody else. One of the things that Mark brought up earlier was the ability or inability in the training environment to really replicate some of those dynamic, immediate decision-making things in the training process. And one of the things that we've started to do recently is implement riding as an extra, much like people when they're getting checked out as a paramedic, maybe they ride as a second paramedic or a third paramedic or something like that for a period of time. Maybe looking at, if your staffing allows, doing that with the officer position as well and riding that person up in the front right seat, even with an existing officer still in that apparatus, if that's a possibility. That's something we've just started to do recently. One other random thing, I'm really big on instructor stuff. Obviously, ISFSI, everybody on the call is big on instructor stuff. One of the things that I think occasionally gets missed in Fire Officer 1, and I forget, maybe it was Jack or I forget who just mentioned that they were maybe on one of the committees for NFPA for officer or instructor or something. But anyway, something that often gets missed is that instructor 1 is technically a prerequisite for officer 1 in 1041. And I think that's something that a lot of folks miss. And they'll get started into some of those, they'll get started down that path for officer 1, never having really hit much of those instructor JPRs and concepts and things like that. And that's so critical. Another thing just to throw out there, something that we implemented a few years back was to kind of, from the labor side of things, forcing the hand a little bit of the department as far as officer training goes, getting that stuff into your union contracts. And that's something to think about as well as part of a promotional testing or promotional training type of article. If you have those in your bargaining unit, in your collective bargaining contract, something to think about getting that officer training in there to kind of, if you're in a situation where the department is simply, or the senior management of the department is simply not providing that, going the union route is another way to kind of get some of that in there. And then last but not least, a little bit more down into the curriculum wise and some stuff that I really like to talk about in officer development classes. I'm full-time back in training right now. And so conducting all the officer classes for our organization at the moment. And one of the things, and I believe it was Jack maybe that mentioned this during his, talked about the snowball effect of if you have a, kind of a mediocre officer, then how that, kind of goes down the line to others. And one of the things that I think is so important to talk about officers as they're in their initial officer training is the concept of being the officer that the others will someday want to be, right? Everybody in the classroom, it's a good exercise to go around. Everybody in the classroom, without saying names out loud necessarily, but go around the classroom and saying, hey, when you were a firefighter, think of 3, 4, 5 names of people that you're like, that someday I want to be like that person, right? And then think of 2, 3, 4, 5 names of somebody that you've interacted with in your career where it's like, man, I would never do what that guy did. I would never be that person, right? And realize that you as an officer at all times are really under that same microscope. And you are falling into one of those 2 categories for all of the firefighters that are working for you and working with you all the time. They're seeing how you interact with people at the dinner table. They're seeing how you, if you scream on that structure fire size up and all that kind of stuff, right? So you're always kind of falling into one of those 2 categories of someone that they'll aspire to be, or someone that they're going to just, whatever, this guy doesn't know what he's doing, or even worse, this guy's a complete a-hole, or whatever the case may be, right? So really trying to get it into those developing officers' heads or aspiring officers' heads, that they're kind of under that microscope all the time, and to really raise the bar. And hopefully that would then, inspire other officers, because that's really where the drive from that comes from, right? Is people want to be officers. They want to aspire to be officers in their own career because they work for these awesome, fantastic officers and think, hey, I want to be like that someday. And then last but not least, I would be remiss to not mention something that I talk about all the time in classes, and I'm sure you all do as well, which is the extraordinary importance of looking at case studies in officer training. When you really get down into the weeds on the recognition, crime, decision making, and all of that kind of stuff, and trying to add some more slides to the slide tray that may not be there yet in terms of tactical fireground operations. And I love listening to Chief Carroll and some of the classes that he does about case studies and things like that. And a lot of folks on this panel do great work with that. And I think there's, obviously nobody's going to run an officer development training program without looking at some case studies of fireground line of duty deaths. But I can't emphasize enough how important that is, that your students in the officer development classes are looking at those as projects. And particularly the ones, without going into specific incidents, particularly the ones that get down to 360 size ups and tactical decision making is the first to company and things like that. Really hitting heavy in the tactics, not just on the drill ground as part of that process, but diving super heavy into NIOSH reports and things like that is something that I'm definitely passionate about. And we really do that, and do it on the front end, right? When we start to talk cognitive, affective, psychomotor domain stuff, hit them with that affective domain stuff. Get them to care about that curriculum before you start to go down that road. Before you start to talk about some of those topics in the class, start it out with a case study from a line of duty death and make it relevant as to why what we're about to talk about, why that matters, and kind of start with that, particularly on the tactical stuff. So anyways, just some random thoughts. How about I kick it over to Kimberly?
Thank you, Brad. In my fire service career, being a firefighter, hardly any issues. You do your job, you follow the orders, you move on. You go to the trainings and you learn. When I became an officer 10 years ago, by far the hardest part of my career was becoming a fire officer. And I hate to be the one that has to bring this to the table. I agree with everything that everyone is saying, but I feel that as I've traveled as well, one massive piece that is missing in officer training is the development, not just as the tactics, but as us as people. So topics like emotional intelligence, behavioral health, and diversity, inclusion, and harassment are serious topics, and not just topics of these are the definitions, but how you actually, you learn about that, you integrate it into your job, and then how you integrate it into developing the people below you. I think that is a huge missing link in the fire officer career, just in my last 10 years, and probably by far the biggest struggle I've had as a fire officer, on what I've had to come up against.
Good stuff, Kimberly. You know, if anybody has any questions, feel free to fire them off on the chat, or just kind of raise your hand and we'll try to call on you there. It gets harder and harder as I can't see anybody's names. I really like what Brad said about, you know, everybody's watching you and they're figuring out what to do and what not to do. And I can say this with confidence now that I've had a graduate course on what not to do based on my current working situation. But that's just as powerful. I think it's even more powerful. It's like, yep, I wouldn't do it that way, and yep, I wouldn't do it that way. So pay attention to, you know, how everybody's reacting around you and what other people are doing as well. Let's see, Tim, you want to fire away there with a couple comments?
Sure. Yeah. I don't really have much more to add, because for the last 20 years I've been involved with my department as an officer, we've done 0 officer development. None. Once you get into the position, you're there. You have no requirements for education. It's something I completely disagree with, something I've been against for the last 10 to 15 years. I've been fighting to get more, I don't want to say requirements, but to have more officer development training, whether it be tactics, the personnel issues, and with the new change of guard that happened in the last couple of months, we're starting January 1, we're going to have our first ever officer development training. We're still developing it. It's going to be done in-house for the first for the first try with outside instructors. This way, it's not going to be all of us just up there talking to each other over and over and over again. We're actually going to bring in the outside instructors to do it for the first time as a development thing, and it's going to be a requirement of all officers. They have to take it, whether it be session 1, session 2, session 3. But it's going to be everything from the personnel issues to making the hopefully making the right tactical decisions, to when to call for the second alarm, when to back out of a building, to, how to write the proper memo for training to the training division. So it's going to be an interesting experience for the ones who have never done anything. But we've always encouraged the outside learning, which is something that I've always been on. So it's going to be an interesting experience, and once it happens, I can give everybody an update of how it went.
Awesome. Mark, you got something to throw in there?
Yeah, if I could just chime in on a couple of things. First of all, discussion is just awesome. I mean, literally every idea that everybody has said is the keys to an effective program, every element of it. But I want to harp on a key one that Kimberly just brought up and Chris alluded to earlier, and he gets the quote of the day so far: killing people on the fireground and careers in the firehouse. I mean, that's exactly the point. And to what Kimberly brought up, those quote unquote soft skills, part of the issue we have as a fire service is people hear that term, they hear soft skills, and they think, oh, Dr. Phil, I got to hug everybody, I got to be nice, all this crap. And the first part of that is you have to change. We know who our target audience is. And if all we do is bring in a civilian ADR, alternative dispute resolution, or conflict resolution, or psychologist to come in, it's about that relevancy. But the right voice in front of the crowd who understands who they're dealing with and says something as simple as soft skills are hard. There is nothing more difficult than having a troop walk in your office and break down crying. There is nothing more difficult than having 2 troops in the high bay pissing in each other's Wheaties and trying to deconflict whatever's going on there. The idea is that if we can equate the people skills and the tactical skills and make them understand that they are in fact equally vital, that 5% of the day is just as important as the other 95%. We will get people killed on the fireground unless we are masters of our craft. But in the firehouse, it's death by 1,000 paper cuts. And so to the issues that she mentioned, behavioral health, diversity, the EQ, EI issues, the empathy, to be able to display all that, be able to resolve conflict effectively and communicate as an officer is at the top of the list. And just one small nugget towards that, we know right now in our industry, not taking a lap of the structure and doing a 360 of the structure that is not done. And back in the day, just go charging in through the alpha side and it'll work out. But we now know that that's not effective, and we need to do a 360 of the structure. Well, that same logic applies when we deal with our people. We don't just go charging in, oh, I know what the problem is, I'll solve this problem, here, do this, and we'll be done. No, you need to do that same 360, if you will, on the people you work with. You have to know who they are, what they're about, what they feel, what their background is, who they are as a person, and then you get to move forward with trying to resolve issues. So that, I'll just say, to me, that of all the things we're hitting on, that is just so crucial for any training we do. It's also the hardest type of training to do effectively.
You know, we just went through the newest pilot program that Montana offers through the Montana State Fire Service Training School. And I was really, really skeptical of their Fire Officer 1 class, but I gave it a shot with our guys because it's part of our curriculum of being an ISFSI Pro Board is a minimum qualification for that. And they did a really profound thing, and they kind of incorporated that training and context within the fire officer curriculum as opposed to an incident commander or raw Fire 1, Fire 2 skills. And that was these sets and reps of dealing with a disciplinary issue, these sets and reps with dealing with a distraught employee, or dealing with a disciplinary action. And they made you go through 10 to 15 rotations of different scenarios. And it was really cool because it was people that were outside our organization that were offering these scenarios, because you can sit in front of your guys and say, okay, you got somebody who's caught stealing, what do you do? And it's just a bunch of bullshit that everybody's talking about, because first of all, if you do catch them, then you're going to go about it a completely different way than what you're doing in the classroom. But if you have these outside guys coming in and hammering you time and time again, it was really effective training. So it kind of teaches you that size up on the personal level. It was pretty cool. Let's see, Tony, got anything to add for us, buddy?
Sure. Can you hear me okay? So a couple of things. Your aha moment you talked about, like as a firefighter, right? The aha moment for me as an officer was when I had to update someone's next of kin information, right? When you realize that you are in charge of someone's loved one, right? When there's 3 people or 4 people riding behind you on that fire truck, and you're taking them into what could be easy, right? We could all just laugh it off, or it can be the call of the century, and it could change everybody's lives. That was probably the aha moment where I really should buckle down and pay attention. Still, hasn't helped me with admin stuff, but that was probably the aha moment. One thing that really bugs me, and everybody's kind of mentioned it, so I know we're all in the same boat, is the difference between training for the mission and training for the certification. I think we all think we have to have, and our bosses, right? It's our bosses, I'll blame them. Well, it's them that think we need to have this Officer 1 class or Officer 2 class or Officer 3 class to make us the best guy for the front seat of, well, not even the front seat. I get what you're saying too about, the things we do in the firehouse kill us. Well, those officer classes really aren't teaching us what we need to do for these things. We need the officer investment courses, not the officer development courses, that kind of tell us from the people that have done it before how to navigate these things, right? We're only going to get so much, just like the fireground. I haven't had the experience of one of my firefighters shoplifting while we are out shopping, but somebody has. So somebody dealt with that. So tell me how you dealt with that. Recently, I had a firefighter come, and there's a EEO complaint between a firefighter and the officer, and dealing with that kind of stuff. Again, I'm going home because this person made me feel bad, right? Those kinds of things that I never dealt with until I had to deal with them. So perhaps we could front load that and tell people how to do that. So I really think, and I get it, because in my job we put everybody through the 1, 2, and 3 stuff, the Officer 1, 2, and 3. We've done all that. And again, we can check that box so we can get the grants that we need, right? We need to qualify for these grants. We can say all of our members have these classes, but what they don't have is what they really need to get them through that 24 hours of the soft skills, the hard skills, the things that we need. I understand that the NFPA establishes our officer stuff, and that's for baseline things. And the problem becomes then is we have to then invest a lot of time and effort and probably money to write our own course. And that's where the breakdown comes. When the people see the price tag for us making our own course, that's where they're like, oh, how about we just do this? So then we get the watered down JBL, IFSTA, whatever else course. So I guess that's enough of that. But no, I think I really think this is good stuff. I've missed the last couple of happy hours, and I see now we all get to participate, even while Brad's here. We still get a word in and are able to. So thank you.
Thanks, Tony. We're kind of in the home stretch here. I think we could talk about this subject for hours and hours, and maybe we need to revisit this in a month, just to kind of get into the weeds of what actually everybody's doing. I'd be happy to share our Target Solutions platform with anybody that wants it, as far as our officer development track and what we require both from coursework and from the skills that we actually do. So reach out to me through my email out there. I know Mark's very willing to share all of his stuff too. And I think Mark and Mike, you guys just want to close it up and bring us into the home stretch, unless somebody has some pressing questions or needs.
Damon had a question. He's raising his hand. If we can get to Damon first, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yep, Damon.
Yeah, I just wanted to say real quick, I had, through your email, I tried to send you something and it kicked it back, so I don't know what was wrong with that. I tried to send you for the last one to get some info.
Okay.
So I need to get Seth.
Yeah, I got it right here. I'm typing it up in the chat room right now.
All right. Yeah, I seen it up there. I sent something and it didn't go through. I don't know why. But
okay, I'll send my other one too.
Okay. The other thing I just wanted to add real quick. You talk about getting that buy-in to the program. One of the things I did because we're developing ours as well, is instead of the JPRs and all that, making the task book heavy, just like you see that, we're taking those things and breaking them down into the the stuff that we need, and then they reference, because you already have to, the basic company officer and advanced company officer, those task books are already there with everything that's in it. And so what I'm trying to do is just reference those things so that the officers have the freedom to go ahead and teach these things, like to our acting officers. I think it was Mark who was saying the same thing. I'm the same way. I don't know how we value the position when all you do is say 3 years and now you can do it. And then we've got people here 7 years in still can't do the administrative things. They haven't filled out a employee injury report or anything, all the things that you really need to do. So I'm trying to frame it up that way so that our tally book is just, it looks like a generic checkoff form, but it gives the officer the freedom to really dive in and teach, just from an acting officer standpoint. And then when you start doing that, it starts putting the officers in the position where they see they need these skills as well, those soft skills to help mentor people. And it kind of just throws them into that mentoring role. If we could get an acting officer, acting captain, really show those things. So hopefully that works out. But yeah, and I also like, to help them, using those case studies and those NIOSH reports as preparatory things to get those guys ready for why they need to learn it. That seems like an awesome tactic as well. So thanks for sharing that.
Thanks, Damon. Yeah, I put both my emails and my phone number up there, and don't hesitate to call me, and I'll get you. If I don't have it, I'll get you in touch with one of these guys who do, because I got everybody's contacts here too. So fire away. All right, Mark, bring us home. Oh, sorry, Tim, go ahead, buddy.
Sorry, I know you want to bring it home. I just had one other thing to add, and everybody said some great stuff here. One of the things that I've been thinking about a lot too is something that I've learned from our chief, and that's taking the long view, even in the hiring process. And if you have an opportunity, depending on the size of your organization, it may or may not be, may not be feasible. But I'm in a position right now, I've got an organization of about 300 people, and I get to help with the hiring process and the interviewing. And so when you get some experience with that, you look 5, 7, 10 years ahead at these folks that have the potential to be good company officers. Even if they're brand new, it's all about hiring for character and training for competence. I know you've all heard that before, but if you get somebody that is going to be a rock star, then when the rubber meets the road, they may end up being the chief officer. That's great, but the pyramid of our organization doesn't work that way. But if you can get them in that position as a company officer, your organization is going to be a lot better off.
Good stuff. Mark?
Yeah, I'll a few closing words, and I'll pitch it over to Chief Richardson. And then, Seth, if we could leave this, what happened last time is there's a lot of information in the chat right now, but when we close the chat out, it disappears. So if maybe as people come off of there, if we could leave it open for the session open for like 5 minutes so they can copy information or look at it. So a lot of good stuff. Damon, the other thing, Damon and Brad, the idea there with those case studies, the tactical case studies is critical. What we do is we'll take a NIOSH report and we'll copy it as a Word document. I'll scrub out all the recommendations and all the findings, all the recommendations and the executive summary. The exercise I give to the students is to take only the findings of fact and read it because NIOSH sterilizes everything. So read the findings of fact and then give me your recommendations and write me your executive summary of what you event. And as a learning tool, it's invaluable. Going back to Brad's point about instructor 1, that's your first leadership class, your formal leadership class, aside from what everybody brought up, which is get down to the recruit level. Training week 1 for our recruits is their first leadership class, their first conflict resolution class. The farther you get left of bang, the better chance you have for building a foundation for your officers. And in fact, we call that our foundational leadership training. So at that point, instructor 1 is one of those elements, is a leadership class. Teaching is a leadership skill. And just to dial that class in is that's an opportunity cost. So invest in instructor 1 the same way you invest in officer 1 in all your training. And the second quote of the day goes to Tony, officer, I love this, officer investment, not officer development. That really is the key, because all of us deal with the same thing. Resources are tight. Where are we going to spend our training dollars? The problem is up till now, 85% of our training dollars went to training recruits. And while that's critical, we can't make the slices of the pie thinner. We got to grow the pie. But if you can only take the existing wedges you have, you got to get more of it over on the officer side. Because the expectation for a new firefighter is that, if we're being honest, they show up on their first day with the helmet on backward, we laugh. It's a new firefighter. I don't care how much we train them. We assume they're borderline stupid, and that's kind of a joke, right? But a new fire officer, come on. Day 1, right out the gate, they start making bad decisions. People get hurt, killed, or careers are killed. So that's my closing soapbox. Thank you very much, everybody. This was a great session. Chief Richardson, over to you, sir.
Yeah, I would just like to say thanks again to everyone for showing up. Please don't forget to tell all of your coworkers, friends, associates to stop by and join us. Like I said, we would really like to see this grow and build up. The more people we get involved, the more feedback we get, the better things are going to be. If there's a particular topic that you would like to see us discuss, feel free to let the office know. My email's up there. You can let me know, let Seth know. We would really like for this format to continue be where we're throwing out topics that people really need help with, and that way the membership can get the benefit of learning from each other. So if there's a topic that you're struggling with or something you'd like more information on, please let us know. We'll get that thrown on there. And then once again, please check the chat. There's a lot of good resources and information over there. I personally went to the Illinois Fire Services Institute program that Chief Van Dorp was talking about. It's a phenomenal program. I've been to programs all over the country. It's probably one of the best. So check that out. There's a group called Leadership Under Fire. Somebody brought up about what can we learn from the military. That's Jason Bresler out of FDNY, who's a Marine veteran, also company officer with FDNY. He's got the military involved, Harvard School of Leadership. I mean, we're talking the best of the best are taking, you know, what can the fire service benefit and learn from business, from military when it comes to leadership. Those are some of the ones on there. You can take a look at those. And then my final comment would be partnerships. I hate to say it, a lot of times like to lock ourselves in our training offices and fight these battles ourselves. And the people that can help us are out there. We just have to reach out for them. To me, a huge benefit of ISFSI and the things like we're doing this is the networking. Once again, if you're struggling, reach out. Somebody out there is doing what you need. So rather than you spinning your wheels or not having what it takes, don't forget about your local schools. They can help you with writing. They can help you with a lot of things. So I've ran into 2 instances where I've had well-documented learning disabilities with individuals, and when it came to officer development, they had slipped through the cracks and it finally caught up with them. We're using our EAP program to get them help from outside resources, and they benefited tremendously from it. So once again, just don't forget, try to reach out and look for other partners that can help you through this process. So thanks again to everyone. Appreciate it.
And
Thanks,
congrats
guys.
to
Go ahead.
congrats to Troy Bonfield on his recent promotion to battalion chief.
Awesome.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Troy. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to stay on for a little bit. If anybody's got any questions or wants to pick our brains, and then, you know, thanks. There's some new faces out there today, so thanks for coming, and some same old faces. And I really, really appreciate everybody showing up today. It's awesome, and we're going to do this again on officer development, I guarantee. So thanks, everyone, and be safe out there, and we'll talk soon. Call me if you need anything.
Thanks, Mark. Good topic, obviously. A lot of good feedback, a lot of good things. So, like you said, we may have to drag you back on here again in a month or 2 if you're willing to go for round 2. But
Yeah, you know, part of this is shedding off about 8 to a dozen things. So adding an hour back in would still be a net good thing. It's just a matter of the timing of where we're at the point. But yeah, no, absolutely up and we'll make it happen. Just yeah. Especially, hey, next time I'll probably have 1 or 2 Yinglings, and then I'll just talk the whole damn time. And at which point,
I love it. That's going to be my strategy from here on out.
Painful.
I love it. I'm right there with you.
Their ears will be bleeding. They're like, make them stop, please. Love of all that's good.
hey, you know where some of the best officer development takes place, and it's at the National Fire Academy at a certain drinking establishment. So if we could somehow record and bottle that, we would all do better. So.
Hey,
For what it's worth, I've got enough whiskey that you can talk all night long.
All good, all good. All right.
Yeah, there's a lot of the fire services problems have been solved there after a few adult beverages. So
yeah, I'm sure every one of them was.
To be fair, a few have been calls there too.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, that's true. Someone said, yeah, careers dying in the firehouse. There's probably been a few gone by there too. So yeah.
Yes. Yeah. No doubt. All right. Well, hopefully everybody had a chance to write anything down off the chats and all that, and you know, we'll go from there.
Does anybody have a topic that you'd like to throw out? Does anybody have a topic that we need to be talking about?
I think we can keep on this for a minute. Sounds like we could all use this.
Yeah, I was going to say, if we just break this down into, I mean, it's just too broad of a topic to even be a topic.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it needs to be kind of spearheaded down. I mean, to the discussion point that was brought up earlier, we never spend enough time on the diversity, inclusion, and equality stuff. And that, you know, we put our heads in a bag and we pray that we never have to deal with it. But the reality of it is in our positions, we're going to be forced to deal with it. And if we're not willing to talk about it and talk about it at depth, then nothing's ever going to improve. So
I'll see if I can grab some subject matter expertise on some of these areas, and then maybe we can get them on here. And like you said, we can start taking this elephant and breaking it down into pieces so we can eat it one bite at a time. So maybe once, we'll rotate it around, but we'll keep coming back to this. And like you said, we'll try to focus in, get a little more specific. So yeah, so we can get down to the nitty gritty and the weeds and try to deal with it. So. And if anybody has any recommendations for who those subject matter experts are, by all means, let us know. If you've got somebody that you've dealt with that's really helped you in a certain area, shoot me an email and say, hey, this person would be great on here to talk about this, or this is a great resource for that. Because once again, this is about sharing resources with the membership. So if we can get those people in here, let us know who they are. Because needless to say, we don't all know them all. So,
yeah.
Yeah, and I think to that point, even if we identify somebody who's not a member of the society, some SME from outside, we can
Sure.
come in as
Right.
a speaker. I think that would hold value too.
Yeah, we've already done it. We did it with Brian Crandall, so he wasn't a
Okay.
member.
Oh, I didn't know. Okay, yeah, no, he had a good discussion.
Who first comes to mind is Rudy Horst, who teaches officer development at FDIC every year. He's been doing it for like 20 years straight. So a good one on there too. Okay, guys, everybody good?
All right. Yep.
Good. Thanks,
Okay,
everybody.
good.
Take care. Stay safe.
Stay safe. Stay healthy.